Katherine Langford, you play Hannah Baker in 13 Reasons Why, and this is a fairly intense role. This is a teenage girl. We meet her in flashbacks, at which point she's already died by suicide. What did you think about tackling this kind of emotional intensity when the show first came to your attention?
I think, well, I think I've said this a few times. When I was cast, I actually hadn't read the book, and so it wasn't really until after I'd been cast and met with Brian Yorkie and Tom McCarthy and a few more of the cast members and had read the book that I understood, I think, fully the story we were telling. And I think at that point, that was when I really realized the impact that it could have, but also kind of what I was going to have to go through. And so, I think from the very beginning, despite how heavy and how deep we get into Hannah's life and the experiences that she goes through, we never treated it like tackling heavy content. It was always just about trying to tell a story in the most authentic way possible, and just trying to make it as real as possible.
And to say that Hannah is put through the emotional ringer in the series is perhaps a bit of an understatement. But as an actor, I'm curious, were there times that the character stuck with you off the set, or were you able to really separate playing it on the set and leaving it there?
As much as I'd like to say you go to work and you leave, particularly with this kind of story, not just because of the intensity, but also because of how long we were shooting it, that wasn't something, Hannah wasn't a character that I could just kind of pick up and take off from. I think the further we got into it, the more of her stuck with me. And, I did take time out. Like I wasn't in it fully. I don't think anyone could have been immersed in that character for 6 months fully. But, I definitely did think about her a lot and a lot of the time. And, I think the further we went along, the more I understood about her and the more I grew to like her and care about her. So by the end of it, I was attached because I see her as a person. And I think particularly, with the impact that the show has had and the response that I've had from not just like an overall kind of reception, but particular stories from different people, she feels real and feels like she has more of a purpose than just being a character. So yeah, I felt very connected to her.
Now, you had acted in a couple of short films before 13 Reasons Why came around, but of course this is a completely different animal, like 13 episode, you're the leading role of the series. What was this kind of like acting boot camp in a way?
Acting boot camp. I guess you could kind of say that. I mean, prior to 13 Reasons Why, I think I did like 2 horrendous free short films, like every actor does when you don't have anything on your resume. And then I also did a crowdfunded short film in Australia, which I was kind of really proud to be a part of. But as far as jobs go, this was kind of the first thing I'd ever done. It was the first proper like casting I'd ever had, the first character I'd ever been in charge of, and the first TV show. So to go through it from like start to finish, also because it's a TV show as opposed to a film, it's 6 months. And I feel like in that 6 months, I learned so much. So it was very hands-on, but I think, as hard as this was, it was probably the hardest first job you could possibly ever have. But for a lot of reasons, it was also the best, because I think, the people that were behind this, I wouldn't have wanted to have told this story with anyone else.
The series, of course, is obviously very complicated with the narrative perspective jumping back and forth in different time periods. How did you manage to juggle all of those complicated narratives and keep them all straight in your head?
Well, did they keep straight in my head? No, I think in many ways, actually, Hannah, my job as Hannah was relatively simplified by the dual storylines, because obviously Hannah only really exists in one. In saying that, though, I am quite studious, and I think having it as my first job, or just the nature of what I'm like, we would get we get the scripts, and then they would have coded flashback dates. So I ended up getting like a notepad and writing down every single scene, every single flashback with all the dates, so I could just like look through it and see the scene beforehand and the scene after. But I think overall it was definitely a group effort. The writers did an incredible job of keeping it straight in their heads, and Dylan and Brian were fantastic in keeping that together, because obviously Clay switches back so much. So I'm really glad that we hopefully got it all right, and no one picks anything out.
You're an Australian actor, of course, and this is a series set in the United States, so you're working, in an American accent. And was there anything difficult about that, the accent, or maybe getting into this American character, this American school that maybe from your perspective was maybe surprising or different?
That's a really good question. Well, obviously, because we're going back into second season, we start shooting in a week or two. I've had to kind of go back and start getting back into the accent again, because I've been in my Aussie accent for so long. But I think going into it, I'm quite musical, so I've got a pretty good ear, so I can kind of hear things and pick it up relatively quickly. But I think the real work for me was just speaking in it and embodying it, because I think with accents you can have certain sounds, and so you can kind of get away with things at a base level. But just like any culture, it was really interesting hearing how different people in America speak, particularly, hanging out with the cast, there's people in the cast, hearing how they spoke and different phrases that you pick up that, things that people say in America that they wouldn't in Australia. So I think seeing the differences, not just in the sound, but also in how people talk and what people say, was really interesting for me.
I'm actually a high school teacher in as my main job, and so I've been able to see how up close how teenagers are responding to this show. Many school districts, including my own, have sent out emails to teachers about how to talk about the show, and of course there are some people who have some concerns about the show. I'm just curious, what is your take on how young people should watch this show, and how do you come down on some of the more controversial elements of the show?
Well, I don't really think to be honest, I feel like we shot the show with the vision being to tell the story in the most authentic way possible. Obviously we based the first season on the book written by Jay Asher, and that had such an impact and really resonated with young audiences. So I think we just wanted to tell that story, but tell it in a way that felt truthful and not dramatized and not romanticized, which I feel like we did. And I think the end result was instigating discussion, which I think, again, we were also really happy about, because at the end of the day, it's a TV show. It's not like it literally is. It's a piece of entertainment. So I think the discussion part has definitely been the most rewarding part. And I think in discussion, it's important for people to voice different concerns and voice their opinions, because that's where we learn different things. And whether people like the show or don't like the show, I think it's a very personal thing. So I haven't told anyone how they should react, because we cover so much in there that you're going to react to it differently depending on your own experiences and your own context. So I think it is really person to person, but I just say, watch it. If also, I also want to say, there's that difference of opinion, which is important because it creates discussion and people start talking about, well, why is it bad? Why is it good? Why is this helpful? But then there's also people who, for themselves, they, if you have experienced these things and you for yourself that it may be triggering or painful to watch. There are trigger warnings on several of the episodes, and I was also really glad that we were able to shoot that 30-minute Beyond the Reasons. It plays straight after episode 13, but it's a good place to go after you've watched it, because it is heavy, and I think you need to, like anyone, debrief. So yeah, hopefully I'm glad we got to do that.
And in terms of not just how difficult it must be and upsetting it might be for an audience to watch, as an actor certainly playing these scenes, what kind of preparation did you do going into not just the suicide scene, but also Hannah sexually assaulted in one episode? What were those preparations like for you as an actor?
Well, for me, one of the great things was we at the start of production, we had like a week of rehearsals with Tom McCarthy, not only to go over the first block, so episode 1 and 2, but we also were able to kind of get, you know, kind of the rough journey of what we would do. And I think it was that setup that helped us kind of go through the entire season and have the endurance to go through the entire season without peaking or getting too deep too fast. So when we started out light, and Tom said is, you know, start light because we've got a long way to go. So by the time we got to episode 9, where things really start to get very dark and very heavy, we had somewhere to go. And, you know, I think the producers were great and Netflix was great because also at the beginning of that rehearsal period, we were put in contact with a number of psychiatrists and psychologists and specialists in, well, for me, it was, I talked a lot to Rebecca Kaplan from It's On Us. And I also spoke to a psychiatrist who specializes in adolescent mental ill health. And so when I was preparing for, say, episode 9 or episode 12 and 13, I spoke quite a bit to them to just get like a site or an informative, experience-based, I guess, perspective to kind of add to whatever I was going to do and whatever I was going to feel as Hannah.
I'm just curious, you know, with all this kind of material that you have to deal with, I'm curious as to what the atmosphere on the set was like. Was it really serious, or was there ways that they kept it light for you?
I think that's a really good question, and to be honest, like, I feel like, you know, you're covering serious content, but everyone on the set and everyone actually in the show was so invested, and really was like wanted to know that it was a fantastic environment, not just because people got along, but also because we were able to have fun where it was, you know, appropriate. It definitely didn't feel like it wasn't like a somber, painful 6 months on set and off set. It was definitely balanced by like light moments and joking around. And I think, you know, that was, I think you need that. You can't do this kind of show for 6 months and be fully immersed in it. So yeah, it was a lot lighter than what we see on the show.
Your main scene partner through much of the show is Dylan Minnette, who plays Clay, who's listening to the tapes, of course, and has his flashback scenes with Hannah. You and Dylan Minnette are close to the same age, but he's actually been acting for over 10 years. What was it like working with him?
Brilliant. How much time have we got? Whenever I talk about Dylan, I always seem to end up rambling. So I'm gonna try and just like choose my words, because he is honestly, like, I remember it was my first show, and he's been working for quite some time, and he was just the best first on-screen partner I could ever imagine working with. We're very, very dear friends, but he really, like, he was very generous and very, like, supportive and welcoming, not just as a person. Like, as a person, he's like the nicest, funniest, like just the most beautiful person you could ever imagine is Dylan. And then as an actor on top of that, he's also super, super talented and really, really cared about the work. And again, was extremely generous. I think particularly, like, we both saw that and acknowledged that in episode 11, which is Clay's tape. And it's kind of where Hannah and Clay, their relationship, it all comes together and all falls apart. And that we shot that at night, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I think after we did that scene, it was the moment where we were both like, I don't know, it was just such a special scene to shoot, because it felt like so real, and both of us were so invested. So yeah, working with Dylan was fantastic. And I hope I get to work with him again and for a very, very long time. But I also learn a lot from him, which I'm thankful for, because he is, so great in what he does and has such a wonderful presence. I'm going to stop rambling now, but I just want to, like, say he's great. Like, I honestly have only amazing things to say about him.
What's been the response from young people? Have young people come up to you and talk to you? What kind of stories have they shared with you?
Well, I don't leave the house that much, but I mean, I do, but I think, you know, the last 6 months, I've kind of been traveling, so I haven't had an awful lot of opportunity to meet with lots and lots of fans. But on the occasions that I have, it's definitely been very, very positive. But I think also, not surprisingly, as in like I was surprised or shocked, but just like I think I was surprised by how personally it would affect people. Because, you know, sometimes you'll have people come up to you and they just want a photo, or you'll have people who, you know, are fans of the show. But a lot of the time, a lot of the stories that have stuck with me and resonated with me are ones where people, you know, just pulled me aside or quietly said, like, thank you so much, this show really helped my sister. Or I had the other day, someone come up to me who watched the show and had a friend who died by suicide. And it's hearing those stories and feeling like that watching the show was helpful and good to them, but also knowing that, like, also realizing that the stuff that we cover in the show happens a lot more than I thought it did, particularly the things like bullying. I mean, my high school experience thankfully was a lot, and you know, I'd seen things like, you know, sexting going, just people not knowing how to, you know, use consent, or bullying and cyberbullying and sexual harassment. But I don't think I ever fully realized the extent to which it was happening. So that's another reason why I'm glad the show has instigated discussion, because it's allowed people to realize that they're not the only ones going through it.
Now, as you mentioned, the show is coming back for a second season, going back into production soon. You know, and Hannah will be a part of that second season, even though the audience has already heard the tapes that she left behind. What are your thoughts about going, you know, beyond the novel and you know, and taking the story and character in whatever direction they're headed in? Not, you know, not to ask you to reveal any specific spoilers.
Yeah. Oh, cheers. To be honest, I'm really excited, and I'm not just saying that because, like, I'm a part of the show, because in a weird way I also feel like not directly involved in the show, because I appreciate it as an audience member, but then when I have to work, I kind of work. So I get to love it from two points of view, which is really nice. But you know, having read the first few scripts and starting shooting soon, I'm really excited, because I think it will give us the opportunity to continue dialogue on things that are important. But it's also going to be a different story, but I think in a way that will still carry on the importance of what we did in the first season.
I have to say, one of the most affecting scenes for me, again coming from a teaching standpoint, is the scene with you and Derek Luke as the counselor, which was a very, very intense scene. Can you talk about what filming that scene was like and working with Derek?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, Derek is so wise and has such a mellow presence, but what he does is so subtle, but it's very truthful, and he really cares about the work he's doing. I think shooting that scene, it's funny because we shot that scene. I think it was the last day that I worked. So the day that I wrapped was when we wrapped that scene. And a fun fact, we did it sort of not long after Hannah's final scene in episode 13, where I'd got a cold the night before. So I kind of have a cold when I'm doing it, which is what I noticed when I'm filming. When I watched it again, which obviously, like, isn't a big deal because it's about the content. But yeah, that's a fun fact. I sound a little bit nasal because I have a cold. But it was a really interesting scene to not just only perform, but I think to rehearse. Kyle Patrick Alvarez, who directed episode 5 and 6 and then episode 13, got Derek and I in a room when we were rehearsing it, and it was just one of these scenes where it felt so easy, because it felt, especially I think at that point, just coming from Hannah's point of view, like, you know, and what she'd gone through, saying this kind of thing, everything she was saying felt real. And I think so that was a credit to Brian Yorkie and the writers in the room, but then also the way that Kyle decided to shoot it. He was very specific. We had I think we had 2 cameras. So I would be sitting here and Luke would be sitting in front of me, and we would have these cameras circling like in this cyclical motion, so they would kind of get everything. And then the close-ups. Sorry, now I'm just like diving into how much I love that scene. But you know, Kyle was very specific on how he wanted to shoot it and why. And I think when you watch it, it's intricate, and you can feel those intricacies, even though Derek, Luke, and I are not really doing very much, and we're just sitting down. It's all in what's going on inside.
One last thing, you know, with season 1 as successful as it was, as sparking as much conversation as it has, and now going into season 2, is there anything in particular looking at this show that you want viewers to be able to take away from Hannah, you know, from watching the story and from certainly your performance in it?
You know, I think season 1, there's so much that you can take away, but I think one of the biggest things is just knowing that you're never alone. Knowing that even if you feel broken or that there's something wrong with you, so many people are experiencing what you're experiencing, and there is always help there for you. And so I hope when people watch this, it's a way for them to see, you know, not only, you know, I hope that they not only are able to kind of be able to talk about different things, or maybe identify with either the characters or what they're going through, but also in regards to Hannah, see where other people were wrong, but also see where the opportunities where she could have asked for help, or the opportunities or the avenues that she could have gone down for help. You know, I think it's such a tricky thing, because it's no one's fault, but it's just, I think it's a way for people to sorry, I'm like mumbling my words, but what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, I think everyone should take something different from the show, and they will, depending on whatever resonates with them the most. But I think with Hannah's story, it's important to see where she is and see how you can get out of that situation, and the avenues you can take. But mainly, just like, you're not alone, and you're not broken. So.
Well, I want to congratulate you again on season 1 of 13 Reasons Why, and going into season 2, looking forward to many more reasons why as we go along. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on here, and I can't wait for season 2 to come out.